The Realms has many little clubs like the Stalwart Society of Adventurers who go and explore distant places and quite often run into horrid monsters and have to deal with them. This is a tale of one such monster hunt. Listen in. Another Edtime story. The Great Hunt for the Loathly Worm. I've been asked to say more of magic, specifically the magic that lurks in this vicinity, here in these bucolic farmlands within sight of Lake Ontario. So of course I shall, not that it will help you overmuch. Dooms are dooms, and yours will come for you, regardless of your preparations, deceptions, and denials. Nevertheless, if you trifle with magic, doing so shall afford some small amusement for those around you, and myself and other masters of wizardry who lurk among you, watching the local wildlife fumble with incantations and enchantments and the occasional curse. So, without further ado, let me relate a tale concerning the Loathly Worm. It layered within the proverbial stone's throw of right here. So, you may think a dump site stretches south for some goodly distance of us, starting just beyond yon cenotaph, but it's a cover-up. The big dig that was begun to remove all evidence of what I left behind, I, the rather careless and messy dragon hunter. Yes, the Loathly Worm was a dragon, and not the improve the neighborhood, dine daintily only on maidens sort, either. The Loathly Worm was the sort of dragon who hangs out in alleyways looking for trouble, and sports an eye patch it switches from eye to eye as the fancy takes it, as it jauntily smokes cigars of disgusting smell that two men would struggle to lift. Yet, it infests these fair hills no more, and I am part of the reason why. Let me tell you of how that came to befall. Once upon a time, not far away at all and not so long ago, I was hiding out here on your earth, nursing my wounds after an unfortunate disagreement with a spirited witch. I believe they bill her as the Vermilion Hag these days, ever since she defeated the fighting ghost for the belt of... but nay, that's another tale, and one that involves details of intimacies with a lady and fighting words, and besides, she can mop the floor with me, so suffice to say, I was malingering hereabouts when harrowing news came to me, in a time of year that any farmer will tell you is quite unsuitable for harrowing, that the Loathly Worm, a creature great and terrifying, of late believed to be legend, is both very real and is enacting depredations upon the fair citizenry of Camborne. All three of them. Nor shall it stop there. It is a manslayer, a womanizer, and an undecided slayer, that shall not cease in its slayings and devourings until the land is deserted of all but itself, whereupon it will drag its bloated body away to find new victims. In short, an infamous beast, scaly it is, long-jawed and many-legged, and it sports tattered bat wings that can propel it aloft only when it is starving. For the rest of the time, its serpentine bulk is too bloatedly massive for it to depart the ground. Long is its tail and mighty, capable of splintering barns to matchwood and armored knights to bloody pulp and shards of flying metal at a blow. Well, such were the reports. So, I reckon this worm should prove the sort of challenge that stirs the interest of a jaded blackguard like myself. Whereupon, I girded myself for the fray, which in the case of a wizard involves drawing runes all over your unclad body, binding enchantments of power to them, and then donning garments to cover said runes, so a foe cannot readily identify and counter them, whilst you, as it were, rain holy bloody hell upon the foe with your wands and rods, your ready spells, and your little pet frogs too. Well, no sooner was I girded than a farmer, a short and middle-aged man who bore signs of great fatigue and worry, came trudging up to me, his plow still harnessed to his shoulders, and warned me that the Loathly Worm was right behind him, back that-a-way. I looked and beheld a black and oily plume of smoke in the near distance. When I pointed it out to the farmer, he nodded wearily and said the devouring of several thousand souls had evidently slowed the gleeful stalking of the bloated dragon. Here it's gorging. It had been both nimble and merciless, ripping livestock and farm folk alike to bloody shreds, which is the after state they prefer to reach on their own terms and own time, though too often the taxman has something to say about that. The worm attacked, my trudging informant glumly said, without mercy or reason, killed indiscriminately and left only devastation in its wake. The Canadian Armed Forces had sent its lone tank against it and received back a mere litter of nuts, bolts, and fast food wrappers. A farmer who'd seen the encounter from hiding claimed the tank had scored a direct hit, but the scaly breast of the worm that it transformed into a great bloody hole knitted together again in mere moments to become as unblemished as it had begun, by which time there was no more tank to bother it.
So, Ed, how much of the realms do you think is still left completely uncharted?
Oh, maybe 85%?
God, that is so much.
Well, you know, it's a huge world, and I want it to feel alive. And the nice thing about these videos we're doing is somebody asks a question or we need more lore on something, I can drill down. I can give you the rich depth that you can't always squeeze into a published gaming product.
And if you are enjoying these videos, please consider becoming a protector of the realms. You can head on over to patreon.com/EdGreenwood, and there you can not only directly support Ed, but also help facilitate us being able to make these videos for you here. But if you don't want to become a patron, you can always support Ed another way by going to his shop. I will leave a link to that down in the description, and you can get all sorts of super cool Ed Greenwood official adventuring gear. But for now, please enjoy the rest of the video.
Thank you. Desperate farmers had met to try and think of a way to make this scourge of the landscape do some good by luring it in the direction of Toronto, in hopes it would devour concrete and skyscrapers and mountains of garbage and leagues upon leagues of urban sprawl, and then perhaps continue onwards down the 401 to the benighted flesh pots of America. But then, the most brilliant and insightful of the gathered stewards of the land gravely pointed out that it had come from Toronto and was presumably seized with the desire to no longer be there. In short, that this fair locale was, for the nonce at least, stuck with it. The press rushed out from the fair metropoli of Ajax and Whitby and Oshawa to help by printing shouting headlines about the great hunt for the Loathly Worm, as if it was some sort of sneak thief that a sighted person might miss seeing, beast or its spoor or smoke rising into the sky, and beneath them lurid stories of plagues and rains of frogs and the end of the world, and we really mean it this time. Reading these sober and balanced accounts, I winced, and though I knew not if I was capable of taking down such a monster, it seemed only sporting to try. So I set off in the direction of the smoke, and soon enough met with a rabble of folk fleeing in the other directions. Their faces seemed battle-scarred, as though they had seen indescribable horror. Most had no more than the clothes on their back. Many looked confused and agitated, while others seemed only lost in utter despair, like Canadians peering into their wallets. Beyond them, I found only a scene of utter ruination, buildings dashed to rubble, and massive holes torn in what walls remained standing. I saw not a living soul, no man or woman, no livestock, nor vermin, nor birds, or beasts of the field, and then, cresting a hill, I met the gaze of the Loathly Worm itself, lifting its head to regard me with interest. Hungry interest, may I say. I wasted no time, but straightway hurled a brace of fireballs, twisting the words of the incantation to make them devour life not with flame, but with necromantic fury, and beheld the worm's head disappear under my onslaught, leaving only a scaly stump of a neck to wriggle and sway, more or less upright in the air. Then the worm slumped to the ground, and I breathed a sigh of relief, dead with but one spell, no longer to menace thousands. Some lurking child or other who'd seen my accomplishment let out a ragged cheer, just as the dead dragon came to life. Its scaly bulk rose on taloned feet, and blood fountained from that neck stalk as it launched into a charge that brought it upon me faster than some 401 drivers on the way back to Quebec. I conjured a rain of swords, watched them plunge down to pin-cushion those greasy scales, and beheld the wounds expel my blades and heal themselves in a trice. I fed it lightning, staggering it just long enough for me to do the bold, heroic thing, flee like a frightened rabbit. In strategic withdrawal, of course. By the time I'd conjured up a shadow horse beneath me and urged it into a wind-swift gallop, the neck was close behind me, straining to reach me, and one great and decidedly pissed off, I was growing up out of it, glistening and bulging like a poached egg. I made my magical mount dodge just long enough to loose a mighty disintegration magic, and had the satisfaction of seeing the worm's left foreleg vanish, forcing it into a stumbling hobble. Short-lived satisfaction, I assure you, without much hope of surprising you with that news. For the moment, I turned my magical mount around in a great arc towards Lake Ontario, hoping somehow the Canadian Navy could loose some mighty broadsides at it, and then I recalled how thin that naval force was upon the waters of Lake Ontario and how long it might take them to get anywhere near the Loathly Worm. It would quite likely be starving and flying by then, and for all I knew could outfly the speed of naval shelling. No, I'd need to fight this beast another way, immobilize it, then deal such destruction upon it that it would be utterly annihilated before it could free itself. So I made my mount soar and hasted myself when it landed and set to work with digging spells, playing conjured music, Nickelback for the best goading, so the worm would not miss where I was. I needn't have worried. I only just had time to prepare my trap in some poor farmer's innocent solar panel-adorned fields, ere the Loathly Worm came galloping upon me, missing foreleg growing larger and stronger with each stride. Its head was back whole, long jaws and all, and they spread wide to breathe something at me, so I lofted the human manure from Toronto dressing of the field next door in a great wet brown cloud and fed it to the worm, just as it breathed fire, of course. The resulting explosion was impressive, the new head spinning around thrice in the air as it cartwheeled away and left its neck lonely again. And the now sightless worm charged straight into the deep trench I'd dug. With a spell, I toppled all the solar panels down atop it, and then with another spell, heated them with the hot brightness of the sun. Scales popped, and worm flesh sizzled. Yes, it smelled like bacon, but probably tasted like chicken. Rattlesnake does. And then I conjured venom to boot, and let it fall with a great hiss onto that cooked worm flesh. Now, I haven't mentioned this in public before, but I enjoyed a brief dalliance with an American wizard of war, and from her gained a conjure napalm spell, and I did not hesitate to use it at this time. Prudence be damned. Whatever gods there be willing, nothing should be left to the creature but ash and bone, winning me time enough to read my precious Shatter Regeneration Scroll. The carnage was impressive, as good as a cottage barbecue gone wrong enough to take cottage, dock, moored boats and all, and by the time the fires had died down, a blackened skeleton was all that remained. I read the scroll carefully. When I was done, the bones were still charred and hadn't moved at all. I regarded it with satisfaction, ere turning away to rest and renew my spells, for I did not doubt that the battle was far from done. In the morning, I returned and winced. Farmers were posing with the remains. I yelled at them to get clear, but they responded with the quaint and friendly middle finger gestures so beloved of native hereabouts, and were still doing so when the Loathly Worm's head, a head that hadn't existed on the charred neck at all the night before, spun about with snake-swift speed to swallow one farmer, and in the same snapping of jaws, had random arms and legs off 3 others. Then the dragon rose, growing flesh and scales over its bones as I watched, and I beheld its various blackened limbs slithering along the trench to knit together and make it whole once more, whole and thin, its back wings flapping restlessly as it contemplated flying. Not for long. Its eyes fell upon me, and it forgot all else in its gleeful haste to seek revenge. Up out of the trench it came, clawing a great new trench of its own in its haste, and, as it happened to be cleaving its way through an old rural church cemetery, hurling stone caskets right and left, one broke open, and that gave me an idea. And spells to hastily cast to carry out that notion, the strongest necromantic spell I knew, and then a truly irresponsible one I hadn't had occasion to use for years. The first awakened the dead all over. coffins and caskets exploding as the shrouded dead eagerly sat up for an encore. The second spell knit them all together into an ungainly colossus of fused together and flapping human skeletons, a fashion runway model writ large. "It's like a movie!" one young farmer shouted in wonder, an instant before the ungainly walking skeleton reached down and sliced his head off with the ribcage of some pioneer lady of peerless breeding. It didn't have time to do anything more ere the Loathly Worm crashed down upon it, impaling itself on hundreds of jutting bones in that doing, and then the battle really raged. I watched it for a time, dragon blood and flying shards of bone filling the air in a great stinging cloud, and then it seemed to me that the Loathly Worm was gaining the upper hand, and I bethought myself that not just any field has a handy cemetery under it. I had best do something more. So I pulled off my stylish cloak, plunged through the personal gate emblazoned on its inside to step into my handy personal closet of scrolls and private throne complete with toilet paper that was softens itself for those moments of relief and reading, and selected a bone shard blast from 1334 Dale reckoning, a very good year. Selecting an uncovered crypt in the cemetery that still had a stout stone door, I stepped within it, turned on the threshold, and read the scroll, just as the Loathly Worm crushed the skeletal colossus and devoured it with savage glee, and the scroll vanished from my hands with the usual momentary glow. So I strode into the vault and slammed the stone door, just as all the bones inside the worm exploded. I wasn't idle as I listened to it rain wet dragon. I was conjuring a hasty wearlight so I could read the other puissant scroll I'd selected from my scroll closet. It was a spell that cost a year of my life, much of my strength, and at least an inch off my manhood, which is why most wizards don't go around hurling it. But I do, and with it, I turned back time for the Loathly Worm and sat down to wait. It will grow younger and smaller until it reverts to the egg it once was, which I shall magically transport elsewhere. The center of the sun should be far enough away.